Hello everyone, this is Shannon Flummerfelt from Flip Schools. Welcome to the Understanding Instruction series. This particular video is designed for faculty, and we're going to spend a few moments talking about the importance of examining mission in order to understand instruction. So let's take a look. First of all, what is mission? You're probably all familiar with what mission is. But basically what it is a framework. It provides and describes the purpose of your school. Some of you may have a personal or professional mission, so it would describe the purpose or framework for the work that you do in education. But whatever level the mission is at, it provides that framework and it sets direction. And what it does most notably is, based on that framework and that purpose, it's a really great guidepost for you to be able to understand whether or not what you're doing in terms of instruction, assessment, any other types of professional practices, whether or not they're value added. So you can take a look even at intention. You can take a look at planning. You can take a look at decision making and then actions. So mission actually becomes very, very important. Typical examples of mission would be something like the mission of our district or the mission of our school is to help all students to become lifelong learners. That's very typical. You see that in many, many schools around the world. Another example of mission would be to state the mission of our district is to help all students to develop skills for the 21st century. So again, we're describing mission as more than just a set of words, more than just something that makes you feel good or maybe inspires you, but it actually is a framework that provides what we would call true north direction. So now you can begin as a classroom teacher to examine whether or not what's happening in your classroom is truly value added in terms of mission. And when you do that, it helps you to understand instruction within the context of your whole school system. So let's take a look at understanding instruction based on the mission to help all students to become lifelong learners. If you're a classroom teacher and you're flipping your classroom or beginning to experiment with it using some kind of blended learning environment, what you would want to begin to do is to think about those choices you're making for flipping your classroom. And if the idea in your district, in mission, or in your school for mission is to help all students to become lifelong learners, then everything you do in regard to flipping or blending your learning environments should be measured against that. So you might say, well, if we want students to become lifelong learners, what would that look like? What would the deliverable be for me as a classroom teacher of instruction that I provide that produces lifelong learners as an outcome for my students? So when you look at the flip technology or blended instruction and so on, this begins to look a little bit different because, again, you're trying to use mission to help you to understand what instruction should look like in terms of whether or not it's adding value. Another question you could ask is, well, if I'm trying to produce lifelong learners, then how do I assess lifelong learning outcomes? And again, you take a look at that within the flipped classroom or the blended classroom or the traditional classroom and figure out, is this really adding value to mission or not? And another question you could ask is, well, what should instruction actually look like that fosters lifelong learning? I mean, you might begin to say, well, gee, is my classroom set up with students in rows and I'm standing at the front of the room lecturing and providing information? Is that the model of what lifelong learning looks like? How do I learn in my life? How do I go about learning? Maybe sometimes I do sit in a traditional classroom. Maybe there's other ways that I learn. So beginning to understand what it means based on mission can really give you some good direction for making instructional decisions. And then let's take a look, for instance, at this mission. This is a very different mission. This one talks about developing skills for the 21st century. The first one we looked at was about lifelong learning. And granted, lifelong learning is a skill for the 21st century, but In this one, we'd begin to look at some different things. So as you're making instructional decisions in your classroom, and if this, for instance, is your mission, you would use this to try to help you to understand what's value added or not. So you could begin to look around and say, well, when I'm all done teaching, what are the deliverables of instruction that I provide? Do they produce skills for the 21st century? Am I providing students with opportunities to work in teams? Am I providing them with opportunities to learn how to communicate better? Am I providing them with opportunities to learn how to think deeply, critically, and systemically? So if these are some of the deliverables of instruction, and that's what your mission states that you're trying to accomplish, then there's a way to begin to examine that and to understand that there is something you can do that's value added. You might ask, what are the skills for the 21st century? But then how are they also assessed? And so again, we're going to take a look at what's happening in the classroom in terms of assessment practices. Are we beginning to recognize and celebrate when students do, for instance, think systemically? Do we recognize when students are valued members of a team and are demonstrating high level of team skills? And what does instruction look like that fosters skills for the 21st century? Again, this is just a basic question about examining instructional practices. If we're thinking about a 21st century outcome here for our students, does the classroom actually look like that? Is the instructional experience within the classroom set up to foster that? So again, you can actually use mission to help you to understand instruction, but you have to examine mission and really embrace it. And then it can actually become a guide for you to understanding instruction. The reason this is so important is that we want to make sure that in flipping classrooms and flipping schools, that you're not just mimicking technology that's out there, but rather that you're developing a deep pedagogical understanding as to what's possible to attain in your classroom. So I hope that this short video has helped you to better understand how examining mission can help you to understand instruction. If you'd like more information, we do have a Flip Institute website at http://theflipinstitute.com/about/. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the video.